Change your heart, change your life, change the planet.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Van Orden coming to you from the Glastonbury Road in Glastonbury, Vermont. And today I want to talk about flow states and deliberate practice. Two very hot topics these days in the world of self-help and success. The reason that these topics are playing around in my mind right now is that I had an interesting experience this morning as I was getting ready for this run. I was tying my shoes and I noticed that I was being very deliberate in that process, which is not something that most of us ever think about. We learned how to tie our shoes when we were a kid, hopefully, and we've gone on autopilot ever since. And I've never been happy with the way that I tie my shoes, but I never thought that I needed to upgrade it. I would often apologize for it or explain it as people would see me tie them and they're like, wow, that's a really strange method. And my explanation was, I'm left-handed. That's how I learned how to tie them. I don't know how to tie them the normal way. So when I listened to Bill Nye's book, Everything All at Once, a few months ago, and he said that there is a perfect way to tie your shoes using the square knot bow, I thought I'd give it a try. Because he said that using this method, your shoelaces don't ever come untied, even if it's just a single knot. And this is a problem for runners, especially in races. If your shoe comes untied in the middle of a race or in the middle of a workout, you can trip, or in a race, you can lose your shoe and lose significant amounts of time. So I wanted to give this a try. And I found that it was really awkward to use this method because my brain wanted to take the easy route. It wanted to do what it already knows. It wanted to get out of this very resource-intensive part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and go back into the basal ganglia, which is where routines are stored, so that we don't have to spend a lot of energy thinking about them anymore. We don't have to be conscious of what we're doing anymore. And that's the basal ganglia taking over, which is what happens when we practice something enough. Eventually it becomes less and less and less conscious and moves back into the basal ganglia. Like driving. You can drive with your eyes closed, but don't do it. It's a bad idea. So as I'm tying my shoes, I noticed that even though I've been doing this for a month now, it's still not automatic, this square knot bow, and it's inefficient. And what I watched was that my fingers were experimenting with how they were holding the laces. And I wasn't even doing this intentionally. I wasn't consciously choosing to hold the laces in any new way. I just noticed that my fingers, or my manual process, was playing around with how the laces felt as they were pulled, and how they could be stopped or cinched, or how the bow could be made a different way and what that feels like. For instance, if you tie your shoes on autopilot, you'll notice that you're not thinking about what you're doing, but you can feel it. There's a certain feeling to each of the steps. So I noticed my fingers really starting to explore the feeling. And I thought, aha, here's an opportunity for me to deep dive into this process and make it deliberate. Rather than let it be completely unconscious, let's look at this, let's slow down, and let's see if there's a little tweak that we can make right now using the horsepower of our conscious brain. Deliberately engaging in the process of learning how to tie my shoes. So what I was engaging in was deliberate practice. And this is important to understand the meaning of deliberate practice, which I'm going to expand upon in a moment. But before I do, I want to talk about flow states, because every other self-help book that I'm listening to now, or pop psychology book, or success strategy book, they're talking about flow states. This state of effortlessness, where you're so fully engaged that time stops or just disappears. There is no time. Time is not even a variable anymore. And you're just fully immersed in something, and this is where true brilliance occurs, inside of these flow states. So if you listen to the descriptions that you'll often get in these books, it sounds like a flow state comes when you allow yourself to completely submit to an experience. When you allow yourself to let go of consideration, when you allow yourself to let go of constraint, let go of judgment, let go of deliberation, then you can just crack the ice, fall into the flow underneath, and just let it carry you into brilliance. Go with the flow. But this is a misunderstanding of what a flow state is or how one gets to a flow state. But that's a really exciting image, and it sells a lot of books because people want to let go. They want to unshackle themselves. They want to break free of the ties that bind and the cultural chains that hold them back or oppress them. And they want to simply be free, to be as they are. That's not a flow state. Well, that's not true. That is a flow state, but that's not the kind of flow state that leads to brilliance. That's not the kind of flow state that leads to greater complexity or greater creativity. That's the kind of flow state that leads to chaos and leads to downward spiral into deconstructionism. To understand why a flow state is not about being completely unrestrained or free, you first need to dig a little deeper into this idea of deliberate practice. So let's take a look at that word deliberate. It comes from a combination of the Latin prefix di, which means down from or away from, and the Latin word liberare, which means freedom. The word liberty also comes from the root liber, free. So if we look at this word deliberate then, it means away from freedom or down from freedom. It does not mean to be unconstrained. It means to apply constraints intentionally. And this is a huge component of being able to achieve a flow state, is that you need to intentionally choose to be constrained. So to do something deliberately is to do something intentionally constrained. You're going away from freedom. So what that looks like in the practice of tying one's shoes is to notice that my fingers have an autopilot. They want to go back to the way that I've always tied my shoes. And if you listen to Malcolm Gladwell, who misinterprets the idea of deliberate practice, you'll think that if you simply tie your shoes for 10,000 hours, you'll become the best shoe tire in the world. Not true. If you do the same thing over and over and over again in the same way, making the same mistakes, you will simply get better at doing something wrong or inefficiently. If you want to actually get better at something, you have to put in a lot of time, not 10,000 hours, but a lot of time deliberately practicing that activity. So with the shoes, it's about stopping the fingers and saying, okay, I see what you're doing. Let's take a look at that. Let's slow that down. All right, it looks like you're trying to make a loop here. Well, let's take a look. Is there a better place to hold that lace to make the loop? So we get a bigger loop, which is then easier to wrap around, because what you're doing right now is making a small loop. Can you see that? Take a look. Okay, so let's try grabbing the lace in a different spot. And now let's practice that a few times. So let's take what you were doing and let's just modify it a little bit. Let's find a different starting place to put our fingers, perhaps. Or lock the lace with a different finger. And you communicate with your body as it's trying to do something. And this is the fun or strange thing about human beings, is that we have many levels of existence. We don't just have one. I like to call this me, myself, and I, and there's more as well, but it's a nice, simple way to frame human existence. And I am talking to me who is doing the tying. Me is my fingers, me is my body. This is me, and I observes me in the process of tying my shoes. So deliberate practice is about saying, if I allow myself to be free, I'm just going to keep doing it the same way. I'm going to go on autopilot. I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to evolve. I'm not going to look for new, improved, and better ways. I'm going to take the easy road. I'm going to go with the flow. I'm going to let gravity do all the work. I'm going to let habit do all the work. And I'm going to get what I've always got. Or as someone, it may have been Einstein, but let's just say someone said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. That's only true if you're not deliberately slowing down and stopping and watching yourself do the same thing over and over and over again. And as you slow down and as you watch, you may notice things that you did not see the first time. And maybe it takes you 1,000 times doing something before you see, wait a minute, why didn't I see that the first time? Oh, if I do this, if I touch that, if I move this, now I've got access to this whole new level. But it might have taken you 1,000 times of doing the same thing in order for you to get the insight that there's another way to do it. But you have to be deliberate. You can't be on autopilot. You can't be checked out or phoning it in. So this run is a great example of that. When I got up this morning and I was tying my shoes, I did not want to run. I didn't really want to do anything. I was having a rough day. I'm having a rough month. And I'm really, really gentle with myself in these states. And rather than telling myself what I have to do or reminding myself of goals that I have committed to, I simply get into the moment, nurture myself, and say, okay, let's just put on our shoes. That's it. And then in the process of putting on my shoes, I noticed that there was a process there. And putting on my clothes, I often deliberately put on my clothes. I do so with intention. I do so and I try putting them on a different way. I try feeling the clothes going over my skin and over my head and hair. And I deliberately involve myself in the process of getting dressed. And now it's become somewhat habitual that I have this really mindful, sensual process of getting dressed. Which is kind of ironic because for most people, sensuality is about taking your clothes off, and I found a way to make putting your clothes on sensual. But that's me. So I got myself dressed sensually, still not excited to run, but here I am with shoes deliberately tied, clothing deliberately on, a little bit of positive feeling because I had that sensual experience, and I had a moment with my shoe tying. And those moments feel good because it feels like I'm actually engaged in my life. I'm not just being carried along in some narrative. I'm not just being carried along inside of a depressive context, like it's another day and here I am and whatever, and I don't give a crap. Finding those deliberate moments is like opening up a window, letting fresh air in and saying, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be this way. There are other possibilities here. So let's slow down and let's take a look. And let's actually touch things in a different way. Let's move things in a different way. Let's not go with freedom, because freedom always takes you downhill. Freedom is about achieving a low energy state. That's what everything in nature wants to do. That's entropy, if you're familiar with entropy. It's about everything moving to a lower energy state. Gravity is about things moving to a lower energy state. Time is about things moving to a lower energy state. Everything in physics is about things flowing downhill, either literally or figuratively. And your brain wants to do the same thing because there are chemical and physical costs to mental and physical activity. And your brain and body are incredibly efficient. they want to do everything they can to conserve energy because we evolved in an environment with very scarce resources. So the brain does not like to waste energy, so it tries to make things as efficient as possible. But here in America in 2018, I don't have to worry about scarcity of food or calories or energy. So I can take my time and be deliberate. I can actually make better use of my time. I can make better use of being an American in 2018 and actually try to do something with that rather than flowing downhill into a state of depression, even though I'm living in the time of greatest abundance in human history. Freedom leads to depression. Freedom always leads downhill. So, back to the run. I drove to the gas station, gassed up, felt myself wanting to turn towards Woodford to the right, where there are many, many, many trail options, but there's road construction on Route 9, and for some reason my brain didn't feel like driving through the road construction. So I didn't turn right. I found myself turning left, and left generally goes towards Mount Anthony or New York State, which I didn't feel like going to. But Mount Anthony wasn't feeling appealing either, so then I took the next right-hand turn, and now there's Bald Mountain in front of me and the White Rocks Trail. And I did that a couple days ago, and that didn't feel good. And I realized that I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready to confront movement yet. I wasn't ready to confront me being an athlete yet. So I thought, let's just take a little drive. And I kept going north past the White Rocks Trail and up onto some back roads in Vermont, dirt roads, really, really beautiful country that people imagine when they think of Vermont. And it's only 15 minutes north of my house, but I ended up coming to Glastonbury Road. And it's a dirt road with some homes on it, but then it turns into the forest road that I'm on now and climbs consistently for 5.5 miles. And as I got out of the car, I still didn't feel quite ready, but I felt safe in the choice of being where I was. I had had enough time with myself. And the interesting thing is that I was allowing myself to flow downhill. And sometimes you have to allow yourself to flow a little bit downhill in order to get up enough speed, in order to get enough momentum to then carry yourself uphill, which is what happened. So I started my watch, took a few steps, and realized that my heel and Achilles tendon on my left were screaming at me. So just real gentle, send it love, and plodding, barely running at all, and just got myself into being where I was and looking around. And I didn't intend on running all the way to the top. I just intended on moving. And as I moved, I became a little more involved in my body, and a little more involved, and a little more involved, and then suddenly the world started to get bigger, and my heel stopped becoming the focus of my attention, and my legs and my tiredness and everything else kind of faded into the background. I faded into the background. My body started to fade away, and the world around me started to show up. And this is the thing, that when we go downhill, the outside world doesn't show up as much. It's when we go up that things show up, because we lose ourselves when we connect with ourselves. And it's kind of ironic. The more mindful you become, the more you disappear. Or at least the more your suffering disappears. So I ran to the top of, not the entire mountain, it continues going for another few miles, but you reach a nice level spot, and that was 5.5 miles. So this will be an 11-mile run. And that's not something I intended to do. But it's my process of deliberate practice. So deliberate again. Away from freedom. It's about constraining yourself. It's about saying that there is a big world out there, and if I allow myself to just freely fall into that world, that things are going to move into chaos. And the only way that I'm going to improve my state, improve my mood, improve my day, and allow myself to be powerful, creative, and productive is to start narrowing down what I'm doing and start narrowing down what is available to me. I'm going to limit my possibility. And I'm also going to limit my focus and attention. And I'm going to start by focusing on my body. I'm going to start by focusing on the mechanics of what I'm doing. And that's what happened when I got out of the car. Okay, let's just tune into your body, and that's it. Boom, there's my heel. Oh, that hurts. Okay, there's my quads. Yeah, they're tired from yesterday's run. Okay, there's this, there's that. Whatever the sensory inventory that shows up, you tune into it. You don't make a story about it, but you just tune into it. You notice it. You move through it. And maybe you say, well, what if I run like this? Up on my toes a little more and don't let the heel come down as much. Does that change my heel pain? Yeah, it does. Okay, there was some deliberate practice there. So I go through this inventory and then I make some changes. I make some adjustments. I'm deliberate. I'm moving away from freedom, which is just to allow myself to continue in that state. We've got the inventory. Now let's unpack it. Let's take a look. Let's touch it or interact with it in a different way. And by doing that again and again and again, I got myself into a state of flow. But here's the thing about flow. It's not freedom. I was flowing uphill. I was getting myself into a really, really powerful state of flow going up a mountain. And I didn't want to turn around at 5.5 miles. The only reason I turned around is that I have a half marathon that I'm doing on Sunday with several thousand feet of climbing, a trail race. And I wanted to leave a little bit in the tank if I'm going to do this race. So I didn't need to turn around there for how I was feeling. I felt great. I turned around because I wanted to protect that race this Sunday a little bit, not entirely, but a little bit. So flow is not about letting everything go. Or should I say, flow is not about letting your commitments go. Or letting your engagement go. Flow is about letting distractions go. It's about letting stimulus go. It's about saying, I want to flow in this channel and this channel alone. It's like TVs 20 years ago. They had picture in picture, and some TVs had picture in picture in picture in picture, and you could watch 10 things at once. Or you could watch the family show while the game is happening in the bottom corner. So, hey, I'm spending time with my family and I'm also watching the game at the same time. I'm multitasking. No, you're kidding yourself. You're not really focusing on any of them. You're distracted and not having a deep engagement in any of it. And that's, again, a flow state. To really, really get flow, you have to be constrained. You have to give up your freedom. You have to put yourself into a place that is deliberate, that is conscious, that is intentional, and that involves effort. And you have to be mindful there. And when you do this, you get into these really powerful, deep states. And you start to flow uphill. And it's when you flow uphill that you create complexity, that you create things that can do work, that you create things that are significant. Not when you flow downhill, unless your downhill flow is coming off of the mountain that you just climbed. But you're building that mountain in you first, and then you can enjoy flowing downhill after. But that's not the flow that has the most value. That's just the icing on the cake. It's the cake that matters. So you could think about this mountain. When it rains, the water could just flow evenly across the entire surface, and you get little trickles coming down. You wouldn't ever really get any significant flow, and in fact, when the sun came out, it might just evaporate all the water because the water wasn't concentrated enough in any one area to be able to withstand the sunlight. But if that water starts to come together because channels are dug, then little by little, those trickles come together and they form a little stream. And then more of those little streams start to come together. They meet, and you have a brook. And then several brooks come together, and eventually you get a river. And that river can become the Hudson, or the Nile, or the Columbia. And then we have the power to do work. For instance, if you've ever been to Washington State, to the Grand Coulee Dam, or any of the great hydropower projects throughout the United States or Quebec, you can see the power that can be generated by a massive flow. But that massive flow doesn't occur without concentration, without digging a channel, without saying, okay, here's the mountain that is my life, and I'm going to carve a little path through it. I'm going to say, I don't want to go here, I don't want to go there, I'm going to go here. And I'm going to deliberately, which means I'm not going to free myself to go wherever I want, I'm going to deliberately go here, and here, and here, and here, and here, until I start wearing away the earth, until I start creating a rut or a root. And now that I've started creating a little dent in the land, things are going to start concentrating there. It's going to be easier for me to go in that route. And the more I go there, the more flow I'm going to have, because I'm focused, I'm concentrated. My energy, my effort is now concentrated in that flow. And then if I put a power station or a dam in front of me, I can use that to turn this metaphorical energy into work, into use in the world. Now, I ran up a mountain. How is that benefiting anybody in the world? Well, it changed me. It changed the rest of my day. The guy that started this morning couldn't have made this video. But the guy that got to the top of the mountain, because he flowed uphill, now he has the energy to do work and make this video, to actually think clearly. This morning, I didn't know turn left or turn right. I don't know what to do. Should I wear these shoes or those shoes? I don't know which shoes to wear. Grab a pair. Turn left or right? I don't know. Turn left. Next intersection? I don't know. Turn right. Just make choices. Take away your freedom. Don't allow yourself to sit there and spin with unlimited possibilities. Say, no, I'm making a choice. I'm going here. And the more that I choose to go here and here and here, the same place over and over again, which is really the 10,000 hour rule, I'm choosing to give up my freedom. And I'm going to deliberately focus in this spot, not blindly, not on autopilot, but every time I come here, I'm going to be mindful, I'm going to be present, I'm going to explore, I'm going to expand, and then I'm going to explode. As I come back down, I now take that energy that has been released by flowing uphill, and I pour it into my day, into my life, and into my projects. So when you think about flow and deliberate practice in this context, you see what I'm doing now as something that is actually building quality. It is building character. It is building momentum. It is actually building a person capable of greater complexity, rather than somebody wasting time in the world, rather than someone who is running away from something. When I run up a mountain, I'm running towards something. I'm running towards a me that is capable of greater complexity. I'm not running away at all. In fact, deliberate practice is the opposite. Deliberate practice is taking yourself and saying, right now, you're not free. Right now, you're going to do this. And we're going to do this again and again and again. Not because I hate you, not because I want to punish you, but because you're worth it. And because what will come from doing this is extraordinary. And you're going to thank me for it. So there are my thoughts on flow and deliberate practice. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and leave your comments. I want to know how this video has affected you, or what you think about flow, or what you've read, or what you've tried. And if you like this channel, subscribe and make sure to click the bell so that you get the updates. And there's an owl over there. And if you want to be a part of this community, come on over to Patreon. $1 or $2 a month. And you make this process a lot more difficult in the best of ways, because you take away my freedom to not do this by supporting me. And I really appreciate that. $1 or $2 a month. That's all it takes. And you can help me get out into the woods with the wise old owls. Can you hear it? There it is. Did you see it? That was so cool. What a beauty. All right. I'll see you guys.